I feel things like DLC, you guys are here showing a new Dishonored DLC. I mean, increasingly, that's more and more important for developers, right? To think about not just
Certainly.
what you're shipping, but what it's going to look like for the whole year.
Certainly, we view it in terms of like how we're supporting a game and the fan base post-launch. But at the same time, it also depends on sort of how you're set up. As Mitch said, there is the possibility of doing something more in the Minecraft vein, but part and parcel of that is like, yeah, but you're not paying $60 for Minecraft right out of the box, right? When you make a game where you're asking somebody to pay $60 for, it's incredibly important to us that game on its own, with no other DLC or anything else, be worth $60.
Yeah.
It can't be worth, well, it'll be worth $60 if they allow me to buy even more stuff.
Right.
Like, we haven't convinced you yet that the money you've already spent. So we focus in on like Skyrim has to be great even if it never had any DLC or Dishonored or whatever. But then once you nail that, then you do have all these guys who made all of this amazing content who are like, well, now what do I get to do? And you get them to focus on like, well, where else can we take this world and what other kinds of things can we offer? And I think there are a lot of games out there, like League of Legends being a good example, that are able to be pretty reactive to what the community wants, and the DLC can be not so like, well, we're already playing this, so we're doing it, and like it or not, here it comes. But you're able to move a little quicker with smaller things that give the community things that they're looking for. Obviously, much more helpful in a multiplayer. When you do single-player stuff, you tend to focus more on story-based, whereas Borderlands, you've got the ability to do single-player content or co-op. You got a lot more possibilities.
How much, Anthony, do you think the idea of co-op or multiplayer is going to change in the next generation? Because I think that's one thing a lot of people wonder about is this blurring between sort of single-player and multiplayer games, and now, especially with Xbox, PS4, more people are going to be connected than ever before to these networks. You guys, as you know, with Borderlands have done an incredible job kind of creating a co-op experience. But how does that grow or change for the next gen?
I think we're going to see a lot more of it. I think it's sort of an unwritten rule that like anything that's good is generally better with co-op, and certainly Borderlands is designed with that kind of framework in mind. And yeah, now that we know to some degree of certainty that a lot more people who play the games are going to be online, it's going to be easier to get online and play with your friends. You're not going to have to go through a bunch of really crazy infrastructure that Joe Blow might not understand, that you have to have a computing degree in. I think you're going to see a lot more games trying to leverage the fact that much like board games, it's actually really more interesting if you have players playing off one another, because a lot of emergence and a lot of really interesting things can happen just by virtue of having friends around that the systems might not necessarily bring out on their own.
And that's something, Mitch, as a gamer, I'm sure, that gets exciting to think like you're battling against an enemy, but that's actually another guy playing against you and things like that. And that's where it's all going to go, right?
Sure, totally. That was the thing coming out of E3 is every demo had that plot twist at the end where they zoomed out and you're playing with people the whole time.
And that's coming from inside the house.
Exactly, and that's awesome. Like that was what was so cool about the Division demo was they come outside and they're having this small co-op experience, and when they pop outside, there's this other faction. They're fighting a bunch of other human beings, and that's really exciting. And you can have an experience like that isn't necessarily online only, or you're playing competitive multiplayer, or you're playing co-op, or you're playing single player. Being able to bring that together as one experience is really incredible.
But how much of that is, smoke and mirrors? Pete, how much of that do you think really is going to be a fun experience? Is it a parlor trick, or do you think really, games are going to change fundamentally?
I would say that, obviously we're still big believers in single player.
Yeah.
Skyrim, Dishonored, Wolf, Evil Within, all single player only games.
Yeah.
But they're single player only because the experience asks for it to be single player only.
Right.
And we don't want to just cobble or add in co-op or multiplayer because that's the hot new buzzword, but not have it really be core to the experience where well, you're supposed to be playing as this guy who's a man out of time, and having somebody next to you, well, who the hell is this guy? Has he been laying in the bed with you for 14 years while you were in a coma too? Or
yes.
The Evil Within, it's all about you're supposed to be terrified and trying to figure out what's going on, and you get grabbed and you're moving between all these different worlds, and what is this guy doing with me? So it really goes to what is the experience? Borderlands is a game where it just makes absolute sense to do those kinds of things with your buddies, and it's a totally sort of seamless integration. For games where it doesn't fit, I think it's really important to when you talk about next gen, is how do you involve other people in your game even if it's single player?
Right.
And that might be through whether it's just streaming video or sharing screenshots, or the ability for somebody to jump in and watch you play, or the ability to hand over control to somebody and say, I'm stuck, can you get me through this? Or being able to leave things when you play your single player game for your buddy to play. When he's playing the game, he finds your note and is don't open the third door on the right.
Right.
things like that that make it feel like a shared experience, even though you're playing by yourself.
Cool ideas. All right, well, we will see what comes out from the guys at Gearbox and Bethesda, and Mitch and I will be covering them all on our sites. All right, well, when we come back in the bonus round, we're turning to some of the gamers here at QuakeCon to get their questions answered. That's next Sunday, right here in the bonus round.